today in short form. Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second? Been moved and seconded to approve the agenda for today. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Agenda is approved. Next item of business is approval of the April 18th meeting minutes. You should have had a copy of those via email. So at this point, I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes. Any discussion or additions or deletions? All right, seeing none, all those in favor of approval of the April 18th meeting minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Ayes have it. Minutes are approved as mailed. All right, next item is board member reports. Do we have any report outs from our board members?
Oh, well, I want to say thank you for the wonderful event for our conservation dinner. It was wonderful to get to have that again after, I guess, 2017 had been the last time. And so a big thank you to staff for putting that on, because it used to, just so everybody knows, it was LCAB, and it was the LCAB board and volunteers that did that. And so our staff stepped up, and then Steve volunteered some as well. And, but Ariel and I were just talking about how much fun it'd be to get back to having it on a farm. So we're exploring some potential, especially since we've got some great folks on this board that actually have farms that have event venues and things like that. And then we'll try to encourage more volunteerism around helping out with the event next year. So that, because that was probably, it took, I'll just say the staff hasn't said this, but this is me surmising that it probably pulled staff away from their conservation duties and all that work, because planning an event takes a lot more time than anybody ever realizes, like that communication. So maybe next year we'll see if both boards, if we can get members from both boards to do some specific things and help, so that it doesn't take quite so much time for staff to do it. But thank you. It was nice to see folks and to get to celebrate. And we had about 100, I think.
Yeah, I think right around 100.
Yeah.
Which is what they've said in the past. is
Yeah.
Typically how many times. So.
Yeah. So that was great.
I have something that, I don't know if this is really the right place to say it, but I'm kind of looking for support, I guess. During, I guess it was in January, I went with a group of farmers and a member from the Citizen Climate Lobby to meet with Chuck Edwards and talk to him about what we wanted him to support in the Farm Bill. So that kind of led me down this path of getting more involved than I actually want to be, but they are forming an agricultural advisory committee to Chuck Edwards that they asked me to be on, and now I'm like, well, I don't know what to say. I mean, like, I know what I want, but I don't know what we want, you know, so like anybody who has any kind of, you know, input that you want to give me to help me be more informed about what to tell Chuck Edwards we want, I'd appreciate it.
Good for you. That's great.
Yeah,
When are you going to,
The first meeting is this Friday, and then it's gonna be quarterly,
okay,
so
so
Is
you'll be
this,
with,
is this west of North Carolina?
he's in Washington. He's
So
the House
District
of
11 or
You mean Raleigh or Washington?
Washington DC.
he's our congressman from District 11.
Oh, God.
And so you're gonna be presenting quarterly to him. Okay,
And I don't know how many other farmers, I don't know who else is on it, I don't know anything yet.
okay.
Like, they just contacted me last Friday.
Okay.
Like, are you willing to do this?
But you're gonna meet here first.
We met at his office in
Oh, okay,
Hendersonville in
okay.
January. This meeting on Friday, I'll attend by Zoom because I can't go in person.
Okay.
Yeah, one thing that might be good in my very limited dealings with that sort of thing is if he has, you know, specific questions for us, like it's like farm bill input or, you know, conditions in you know, the farmers are facing that are, you know, hardships. One huge one is rural broadband.
Oh, yeah, Aaron said that too,
Yeah.
actually.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I think like in the immediacy, it's more about the farm bill, but I think it's gonna go, the farm bill passes this year, so it's gonna continue on past that, so.
This is the federal farm bill, okay?
Yeah.
And
Because one of the most important things in North Carolina is PUV.
Yeah.
There's always a rumble every year about mitigating or canceling PUV. But that's state, not all states have PUV.
Right.
Mhm.
And for farm bill things, specialty crop insurance and looking at, I can't remember the name of it now, Aaron, maybe you can help me, but there's basically it's income insurance for producers, but for smaller producers, you got very limited choices on the types of support or policies you can purchase. So,
That's a very good point. I read that on the USDA website.
Mhm.
Was one of the problems with insurance.
Yeah, I mean, we ran into that
yeah.
personally when that flood happened, yeah.
Yeah, the federal stuff is all targeted at bigger operations almost than we have, so. You know, it's hard for us to use that tool.
Yeah, I'll try to go on. I'm glad that you mentioned this to us, and we've all got Ann's email, so if we think of something else, let's just email her. I'll go on and try and take a look at it. But I think there's usually, obviously, one thing, anything to do with increased funding for farm conservation.
Yeah, I figured that would be like very specific.
Yeah.
And I mean, we've heard all kinds of rumors that, the IRA funding
Mhm.
is going to be funneled in through all USDA programs and impact our federal funds, you know, for easement programs. But we're not quite sure exactly like what that means in
Yeah.
terms of dollars. And I've heard specifically the funding that's coming in right now through the federal programs from the IRA is going just to the coast. It's not coming to the mountains at all. And they're hoping the second, like in this coming, I guess, fiscal year, that they'll be bringing more funding to the mountains, but right now it's just all, what we've heard is it's all going to the coast.
So it's coming in through which program and going to the coast?
It's coming in through the USDA ASAP program, which is the one we applied for, Agricultural Conservation Easement Program.
Okay.
But like all of the, I guess, what we're hearing is that all of the existing USDA programs are getting a new like flush of cash from the IRA. What is that, the Inflation Reduction
Inflation
Act.
reduction, yeah.
And then the first amount of money that's coming into this easement program is going straight to the coast.
They say, wow.
Fine, yeah. And
Yeah,
I'm
so-
making that decision.
And I'm hearing this from Southern Ap, because they were on this committee that got to hear this. Because you're a land trust, a lot of times all the land trusts are getting, you know, a bunch of information all at the beginning. But that's what we heard, and I checked with the state representative of the USDA, and he said that is true. I'm not sure exactly why. It might be easier to fund, or it's cheaper land, or whatever.
Cheaper land, bigger farm sizes, you
Yeah.
can protect bigger parcels, soils typically are better for agriculture.
So there you go. We're
Yeah.
always having to advocate for funds coming to the mountains. So just like make that point, we've got to.
And I recently gave feedback to the state point person for the USDA program that I wish they could kind of copy the state grant program, where they basically rank all projects and then they fund the highest one in the Piedmont, the highest one in the mountains, the highest one in the coast, and then go around and divide it up regionally. Where the federal program right now, it's highest ranked project. So how are we competing with that 1,000-acre farm, you know, with our 50-acre
We run
mountain
into the same
farms?
thing with broadband.
Yeah.
It really.
So he says they're thinking about changing that model,
Mhm.
but it'll take time, of course, anything with the federal government. But that's another piece, it's like, how can we get some of that money in the mountains, because
Well, one other thing too, that, you know, it might be a bit of a hot button subject, but development pressure in Hyde County is not what it is in Buncombe or Forsyth or, you know, so, you know, if that could somehow be incorporated into it a little bit. The other thing is, you know, if everybody in Hyde County voted for one thing, it'd hard to make a split. If we're Buncombe County, yeah, you know, you got, you know, 270,000 people that, and growing, you know, and Wake, you got what, 1 million plus, so, you know, if you can, you know, get some type of political goodwill for a program in those counties, you know, you kind of assured them for the whole state. You know, we got what, 6 urban counties in North Carolina, but they've got number left, it's like 50-something% of the population, can't remember exactly, but it's, you know, it's the tail wags the dog there in some ways.
And that's why they still have some of those development pressure questions on, you know, on those ranking systems.
Yeah.
At least that's my hope, is that, you know,
But they'll say,
they'll
yeah,
stay. I mean, and they also have some census, you know, questions based on, you know, what's your county, what's your population, what's average farm size, you know, those kinds of things. I don't really know how much of it actually impacts their choices.
good news.
Well, thanks, Josh.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'll let you know what.
Appreciate you putting in the
We're happy we have an
time to
insider.
that.
Thanks for saying yes.
You just gotta work short days and weeks.
You have to have a day stretcher this time of year. Anyway.
Well, we have it naturally, you're right.
Yeah,
Of course,
right,
now.
yeah.
I'll work on a cardboard cutout of it, sit there. You know, like you're here and I'll pull the string.
She actually thinks and says, that. Could you do that for me then?
Yeah.
Well, anyone else on board reports? All right, well, if not, we will move to applications for VAD and EVAD, and looks like we got Ariel instead of today.
Yeah, so we have one application and it's just a renewal. So we sent out a bunch of renewal letters earlier this year. And so this is one that has been returned back. So it's already been in the program, it just needs to renew its application.
You said,
Sorry, it's Tina and Jerry and Tina Orr in Cameron, it's 35.9.
I'll honestly looking at.
You might have been last month.
I was looking at last month's, yes.
All right, so you just need a motion for us to approve. All right, so do I hear a motion to approve the OR tract for renewal in the VAD program?
Sorry.
Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the OR tract in the VAD program. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Applicant is approved for inclusion in the VAD program.
All right, thank you.
You bet. And now, Ariel, I guess the farmland preservation report's next.
Like Terry mentioned, we did have a successful conservation appreciation dinner last week. It was a lot of work. We're happy it's over. We're happy we have another year before the next one. But we had a great turnout, and we had a lot of our ag advisory board landowners show up. And so it's always nice to see folks.
And for them to meet each other was fun too.
Yeah, it's good all around for morale, you know. And we I think we might have mentioned earlier, but we had a lot of our interested landowners and our ongoing projects that haven't closed attend as well. So that everyone's kind of able to, you know, mingle and realize, you know, oh, this easement project will end eventually. We will get to the other side, so.
It was inspiring to see all the success stories. I
Yeah.
mean, all over the last, since 17, to see all the land that's been conserved. It was really interesting to see the acreages and the farms and all. It was real good.
Good. Yeah, we hope it encourages more applications, you know. I mean, even, we had 2 commissioners attend, Terry and Al, both attended.
And thanks for my beautiful flowers.
Oh, yes.
I'm still enjoying them.
Good. Yeah, we wanted to make sure we honored Terry in some way, because she's helped so much through the past few years, increasing our budget and supporting all of the conservation easement work, so. Again, picture of bouquet. Anywho, so yes, that's exciting, had a good turnout. Might have mentioned at the last meeting, but we're still working with the LCAP board to make sure we are committing all of fiscal 23's funding. So we meet tomorrow, 2 last projects, one from Southern Appalachian, one from Conserving Carolina. So they'll see those presentations. We're based on time, we're actually gonna have to call a special meeting, have, them vote to approve those projects, so we can get it all done by the June 6th meeting.
That's down to the wire.
It is down to the wire. Well, we had originally thought we had a little later into June, but John Hudson, the budget director, was like, nope, June 6th. I was like, okay, we're gonna make it happen. So we're actually gonna be spending more than the $750 total this fiscal year, because we had some rollover funds from last year, and we consolidated some projects. So we're definitely proving the need for continued funding. So
What are the 2 projects?
that is a good question. So there is the Southern Appalachian project is, it's out in Black Mountain, South McDares. I'm just seeing landowner names,
Okay.
but they're I get to see all the presentations tomorrow, so I'll probably know more next month. Susie Rankin's Ag Advisory Board member application came in, and she I believe that will be voted on tonight.
It is on the agenda.
It's on the agenda, that's what I've been told for tonight's Board of Commissioners meeting. So next month, she'll be officially on the board. And she was at the conservation dinner as well.
Oh,
Yeah, I should have introduced you. Yeah, there was about 1 million people. I felt like I was chicken with my head cut off. But yes, we'll get to meet her next month, hopefully. All right, and then, so yes, and we also, another thing that's happened over the last month is we got the land conservation criteria for the open space bond approved by the commissioners, so that's all official. And now we're actually able to, propose projects, bring them to the 2 advisory boards, and start maybe allocating some of those funds. So that's very exciting. It's kind of like that last step that's letting us move forward. So we have we've ranked a handful of projects with that specific bond conservation criteria ranking system, and hope over the next month or 2 to bring some projects to you guys to take a look at for that. So the other thing that we're probably over the next, I think by the first week of June, we should know more about our grant applications that we submitted this fall, kind of get an idea if they got funded or not. I know the federal applications were really competitive, and they had a ton and a lower budget. So I've heard that they've had to turn down some applications on the federal side, but that they're obviously gonna be getting more funding next year coming in. So if it doesn't get approved, or one project, which is the Russ Robertson project that we submitted with the federal grant, if it doesn't get approved, we will resubmit in fall. And then the state program had a similar story where, a lot more requests this year. They were all really great. And in the past, when they got more requests than funding, Drexler went back and requested however much funding he needs to fund all projects. And so the hope is that by the beginning of June or so, we'll know if that request went in and how it's faring. But of course, we won't have any final, information until the budget passes.
so I'm gonna be in Raleigh next week to speak, it's for County Advocacy Days.
Yeah.
And so, who knows, I may try to see if I get a chance to talk with Charleston
That'd be
too.
great, yeah.
And so, that there's a request much more than what we had. in the
Yes,
budget.
that's what I've heard from the budget director at the state level, that's like the plan. I think he did that last year.
Mhm.
And it went, well, and it got approved, and that's why they were able to fund all their applications.
And then later this week, because I'm heading down there Sunday, could you just send me an email with like which projects we,
Yeah.
that way I'll just kind of know the acres and the projects and all
Yes.
that, just that'll be useful.
How does the fiscal year set 24 money that we are going to ask for relate to what we will get in the 34 million bond? What's the relationship? We still going to get 750 or more plus?
I believe that's the plan. Terry will
Okay.
know more.
So these are not together.
Correct, so one comes from the general fund,
Yeah, okay.
the county level, and that would be the 750.
What are we asking for the general fund?
I think it's still the 750.
750, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
and then it's, it would be approximately 10 million coming from that open space bond.
Thank you.
That it would be able to be spent over the next 7 years. So yeah, it's my understanding that 750's request is still in the budget. And it's, kind of up to the county and the boards as how we want to strategize on how we request, like what type of funding we request from what pot of money, and what project, obviously. But our tentative plan at the staff level is to request transaction costs from that 750 general fund. And then should we want to move a project forward for easement purchase, we would most likely put it forward for the bond funds. So that's kind of our tentative plan. Let me know if you have any feedback on that or if it doesn't sound like a good. Just some general easement project updates. We have finished the Larson and Wesley survey, and they're both in review with the landowners and with staff.
You're gonna have to hire somebody else to help you. This list is daunting.
It is, yeah, you were right. I'm sure everybody's feeling that these days, with me being a month and a half from maternity leave. But anywho, so the Ramsey and Sluter easements are both chugging along as well. We are almost finished with the baseline of the Sluter easement. Should get I believe the appraisal by Friday, and we're submitting the D work for review as well. And the Ramsey easement just submitted the baseline, and appraisal deeds and exhibit all this morning for the state review. And I can't remember if last board meeting I had this information yet, but I mentioned we had to move to a phase 2 environmental assessment because there were some findings in the phase 1, and we got just amazingly lucky because the phase 2 came out with no findings of contamination in the soil or groundwater.
Right.
So that's being reviewed by the state and federal program, and they're like basically determining next steps, if there's any kind of remediation work required, or if they're happy with the phase 2. Yeah.
Any movement on the TIG boundary dispute? Has anything happened, or is that still just?
I am still just waiting on Southern Appalachian and the landowner to come to a legal decision. And really it's in my opinion, we had a very good up-to-date survey done. And the landowner, we've heard, is disputing that at a certain boundary, and they don't really have a lot of grounds to go on because this is because of the survey work done. So it is still at a standstill.
No, which one is this?
This is the community farm expansion. So the property that's right beside the community farm,
Yeah.
where they're building a farm stand and have greenhouses.
Oh.
So yeah, I've been checking in every month or so with Jess, and it sounds like it's in Carl's hands, and they're hoping the landowner will just
Work it out.
work it out. But once they work it out, we are dust off those documents, they're all ready to go, we can close. So yeah, good question. It is still at a standstill. I'm gonna check in with Carl again.
Just a survey, not the neighbors disputing the boundary or.
So the way they found out about it was, I guess, the survey. So yeah, the markers from when they surveyed, the landowners went out and saw that and they were like, this isn't right. And so they, yeah, it's all based on the boundary that the survey has set. Which is interesting because just a few years back is when Southern App actually purchased the property and they had an up-to-date boundary survey then.
Right.
And our surveyors use that same boundary.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen more often, that's,
It hasn't happened for us that often.
okay.
We've had one other easement where we were doing the boundary survey and we found that a neighbor had actually built like a retaining wall hot tub situation over onto the property. And the landowners would not have known this unless we'd had an up-to-date survey. So we had to make them move it. But that's the only other situation. I'm sure programs like Southern Appalachian have thousands and thousands of acres. They probably deal with it a lot more. And I know that their stewardship team that deals with these things has been helping with that review process. But you don't want to stir up any, anything bad amongst the community, amongst your neighbor, it's kind of,
So dealing with them, they're pretty strict because when they come and do their checkup on us, we've had that situation where neighbors that are way out on the boundaries maybe have encroached a little bit. And it's land that we really have no use for, but they've still moved over and they won't put up with it. I mean, they'll inform us and we didn't even know. I mean, they're real strict about any encroachment at all.
definitely. I mean, if
So,
technically that acreage has been permanently protected from any building,
Mhm.
I mean, we have to be.
Yeah.
But where does do they make you talk to the
Yes.
landowner? Like who?
well, they get involved, but they come back to us, but usually when they come back to us, we go and talk to the landowner because they're neighbors.
Mhm.
And, but I mean, they're so strict. And I've been having to deal with them a whole lot more, and they just came recently and did our checkup. And up over the top of one of our mountains, that goes on the switchback, we have a road up there. One of the neighbors had just moved like they had just stored some of their stuff over the line. And they went ballistic over it. So I just wrote up there and said, hey, you need to move this because they say you're encroaching, you gotta do it. And that worked out pretty good. But I also know that we had another incident where if you go up Callaway Road and turn up, we have a fence line where the pasture boundary is. And one of the neighbors there has a tree come in, was putting his chipper and all just on that little
Right.
thing. And they went bananas over that. And it's not really usable to us, but we just own it and it was in that. And if you don't do anything, from my understanding, they say they can take over that little bit of land if you don't continue.
It's adverse possession.
Yeah.
Right.
you
Because
don't
when that
object.
happened with the tree company, we've known these people ever since the farm's been there. And finally, my father-in-law just said, that's unusual. I mean, it's no bigger than this room. And he said, they can have it, because he wasn't gonna do that to them, but that's how strict they are. When they walk it, they walk it. I don't know how the county, how strict they are, but Southern Appalachian, they're.
Yeah.
These land disputes are commonplace because up until the last maybe 15 or 20 years, what your grandparents did with their neighbors by saying, oh yeah, you could go ahead and use that path. Oh yeah, you could go ahead and use this. Nobody paid attention to it. But now we had a case in Arkansas. Well, a man wanted to give his son 4.5 acres. We thought the property had always belonged to him anyway, but he went to the courthouse to transfer the deed to his sons for his son to build a house, and they said, well, you can't do that because the Bullocks have been paying taxes on that now for 160 years. And we said, what? We thought it belonged to them too.
Oh,
So we had to swap. We had another piece that was in dispute too, because he had done a recent survey. So we swapped 3.5 acres. We quit claiming what we had, his 4.5 acres, and he quit claimed our 3.5 acres that we thought belonged to him, but really belonged to him. But this stuff is commonplace,
But not with an easement.
particularly when it
Yeah.
comes to right of ways.
I mean, you don't want,
Somebody giving
Deal with
somebody
that
the right of way
stuff.
to use something, 112 years ago. And that becomes the norm, but it's not real. It's not legal. But it's commonplace.
and I think where it gets tricky is if the land's been permanently protected, can't be subdivided, you can't do the switcheroo anymore because it's
And a
all
lot,
one big.
and a lot of this has come about because the GIS is not accurate.
No, they're not.
The GIS tends to go right down straight. It forgets you own a little 1.5 acres on the other side of that lane or road. And that only comes to light when somebody sells something or deeds something over to a child or a son.
Right.
Then the survey says, oh, well, look at that little piece over there. It's an 1.5 acres on the other side of that road. And then it causes a problem.
And then once you.
And
actually
the
get to
GIS is
survey,
responsible because the GIS simply is not very accurate. People look at that as being the legal.
yeah, we've run into that personally, so.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we've had, so, for the Jasperwood farm, that's 4 easements, we are starting deed work, we should have appraisals finished, I think, the end of next week. And we've, a couple months ago, we finished the survey, and we had a situation where, not a boundary dispute, but an area where we thought one of the tracts was 95 acres, and once the survey, actually finds those lines, it's more like 86 acres. I mean, that's a significant acreage difference,
That is.
but, yeah, but the county, he's been taxed, because the county tax office, has been, with GIS, it does seem to be about 95 acres, but anyways, another example of updating surveys, helping us figure out exactly where that land ownership is. So the Splendor Valley LLC easement, we are all approved and ready to close. We are just still waiting for the subordination agreement to be approved by their lender. I got an update that it's, still in review a couple days ago, but, it's starting to make staff rethink doing projects that have mortgages or have, any kind of liens on them, because it really does complicate the end process of the conservation easement, so. Or we need to talk to that lender much earlier in the process, and make sure they, will approve the subordination agreement.
Because you're gonna, many farmers are likely gonna have some kind of farm lien. So I don't think you'd want to just negate doing that, right? But I thought typically that there was a requirement, if there is that it gets paid off the department funds, right?
Yeah, and it's just the situations where what the landowner owes is more than what the grants are coming in at. So say, the grants will pay off 50% of that loan, but they're still owing 50% of the loan, and so the lender will still have to agree to subordinate to the easement while they still owe that amount of money. But yes, most situations, and that's absolutely our preference.
Yeah.
If we're bringing in grant funds, we need to clear out any liens or anything like that on the property before it's able to close.
Good point.
Okay.
So another perfect example, the Clark easement, is all ready to close, but is also postponed because banks are reviewing subordination agreements. So we have those two projects right now.
But I don't know the park easement,
It's Martins Creek out in Barnersville. So again, it's a donation easement. So there's your complicated piece. We're not getting grant funds to be able to pay off, that loan.
okay.
And what we do in those situations is we do the appraisal, so we could submit the appraisal to the bank to show that after this land is protected, it still has significant value and it's still worth well over what is owed on the property. But a lot of times the banks, even if that's the case, they don't want to accept it. It's just bank to bank. And depends on their own policy, so.
How many of these how many of those are I know there's two right now you're dealing with. But I just don't remember us having to talk about that too much in the past.
Yeah, we've probably dealt with 3 other subordination agreements. So it's just as we're getting more projects and we're moving, on these projects quicker, that we're seeing more of them. But it's definitely something we're now asking way ahead of time. At the beginning, we've already had it as a question on our initial application, but now we're, wanting to know, okay, how much approximately do you owe on that mortgage, so that once we are applying for grant funds, we can see, okay, we think the grant funds are gonna be able to pay that off or not, so, yeah.
Does that mean we're not gonna accept any applications for land that has a mortgage on it?
No, I don't think I don't think at this point we need to create a policy like that, because, that excludes an entire group of working farmers that, may or may not have the ability to pay off their property. I mean, yes, we have a lot of folks that have inherited land that maybe own it free and clear, but I think at this point, we don't need to make a policy of that. I think we just, as staff, are gonna be warier, more aware of these projects and try to, make plans a little bit more in advance.
I wonder if some of this dragging of that is because of interest rates and banks right now, they're just going at a slow process, and that's what's taking longer.
That's what our attorney is saying, because she's dealt with, dozens of these subordination agreements, and these past 2 situations with these banks, she's shocked that they're, kind of taking their time / denying, the approval. And because all the other ones that we've dealt with in the past, it was pretty simple. As long as you can prove the investment, then they've been able to approve it, but yeah, that's good. For the Worthen and Krekel property, the commissioners approved that budget last month, so we are now we're scheduling their letter of intent signing. Same situation for the Scott and Susan Soden easement, so then once you have those letters of intent signed, we can start contracting with surveyors. And then the last 4 are our grant applications that we're waiting to hear from. So we have Scott Fisher waiting to hear from the state. We have the Rogers Family Trust, which is part of the Rogers Family Farm, waiting to hear back from the state, and David Rogers from the state, and then Russ Robertson from the federal. And we had successful, I can't remember if I mentioned this at the April meeting, but we had successful grant visits with the state representatives back in April. They came up to see the properties, so.
So they were excited about all 3 of those.
Yeah, and in the past we've had, so they're rotating, I think their grant representatives around the state. In the past, we had the same few, so we were kind of, I were mentioning this, we're used to reading their, reactions, and we knew kind of that they were excited about the project or not, and these were a few new reviewers, so we were we don't know how to read them yet, do they love this or not, I'm not sure. So anyways, we'll see. We think they're good applications, and competitive Century Farm type projects, so, but yeah, we shall see about that, but. And then so the hope is once we get a better sense on where the funding is coming from, or if it is or isn't coming, we'll be able to either funnel, a project to bond or reapply, or, decide amongst the board and staff, what the best next steps are for these projects. That is
Yep, that's all we got for today.
All right. Thanks, Sarah. Quite a lot in the teal there for sure. All right, any other announcements or discussion from the board? All right, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. All in favor? We will be adjourned.
Where's Abby?